Almighty God allow enough for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and reach all the greeting words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. It just means peace be unto you, right? And let's give our brother Malik and brother B. Mike. I was laughing because I was a teacher at Kennedy, and Malik was in my class, and I remember I gave an assignment. When I gave the grades back, if somebody maybe only got 2 out of 20 right, that's only like, 5 points. And I remember Malik being a lawyer for everybody. You can't give them that. You gotta give them a school board 60. I'm like, what is a school board 60? And that just meant that if whatever they scored, you had the minimum that they could have gotten on the F was a 60. I had never heard of that, but he was advocating big time. So it's good that this.
Oh, I wasn't the person getting the F.
Yeah, he didn't get the F. Of course, he was advocating on behalf of others, so I appreciate him for that. And it's beautiful that this is the 5th year that Studio B is holding this. All of this is a part of us really getting back to knowing ourselves and knowing our history and knowing our culture and practicing these principles that will help us to really improve our community. I looked up the word Imani and faith as it's defined in its celebration, Kwanzaa, and it was very interesting when I came up with it. I hadn't seen this definition before, but it says, to believe with all our hearts in our people and their righteousness and victory of our struggle. And as I read that, what came to my mind, and I want to encourage all of us is, the part where it says to believe in all of our hearts, in the hearts about our people, right? To believe in our struggle. And I want to encourage all of us to not give up on our people. And I understand seeing these news reports about the horrific violence and the different activities that go on in the news, on social media. It makes it hard to love us. And it makes it hard for some of us to believe that we're going to come out of this condition, right? But remember, just a few centuries ago, we were on plantations, or we were on the bottom of ships. But look at us where we are now, right? So don't give up on our people despite the sickness that you see us enacting on one another in our communities. A second thing I want to encourage us to do, don't give up on our hip-hop artists. And I know they make some of them make some vile music, encouraging violence, but we cannot forget that music is intentionally sought out, and that music is intentionally promoted and rewarded. And if we're not careful, we'll talk about hip-hop as if there aren't positive artists that are out here. And we got to ask ourselves the question, why don't we hear from the D1s on a regular rotation? Why are we constantly being bombarded with that aspect of hip-hop? And most of those young brothers and sisters, if they knew better, they would really do better. But they're using their arts, and it is providing for them some type of financial reward, and they're doing what they're being rewarded to do. But if they had an opportunity, if they were rewarded and saw people being given contracts for doing positive music, you better believe they'll be doing positive music as well. The other thing I want to say for us is, don't give up on our youth. I know you see the stories, breaking in cars and all of this type of stuff, but don't give up on our people. And I shared this at the Kwanzaa event that we had Wednesday at our mosque, and I'll close out on these 3 stories. I was on, I think his name is Jeff Correa. He's a Republican, he's like a conservative radio host in the city of New Orleans. And he invited me on his show because I wrote an editorial basically calling for the black community to take a greater step in addressing the issues within our own community. And he brought me on the show because he thought he was going to have me as a black person just to speak down on our community. So as we were talking, he said, well, Mr. Muhammad, what do you attribute the violence in the black community to? I said, well, that's easy. I said, that's from the self-hatred that has been instilled in us when we were on the plantation. And he's like, oh, there you go. You're blaming us. You want to put slavery was in the past. Now let him finish. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, aren't you a Catholic? He said, yes, sir. I said, don't you believe in a concept that's called the original sin? He said, yes, sir. And if you don't know, the original sin is that what Adam did in the garden has caused all of humanity to be in need of a Messiah. And he was like, yes, sir, I believe in that. I said, well, let me ask you this question. How could what a man allegedly did 6,000 years ago affect the world today? What our people experienced a few centuries ago can affect us mentally and spiritually today? So that has had an impact on us. I teach in a high school, and there are young children who didn't sit on the back of the bus, but they freely go to the back of the bus. I see in the classroom, have to tell them not to use the word nigger. And they don't even see it as being a problem. Where do we learn that from? And I close on these two stories. I'm talking about how we view ourselves. In the Bible, there's this story in the book of Ezekiel. There was this prophet. And God took Ezekiel and he placed him in this valley of dry bones, right? And the bones they weren't literal bones, but they were symbolic of a people. They were all disunited. And God allowed Ezekiel to hear these bones speak about themselves. These bones had nothing good to say about themselves. They said, we're without hope. We're never going to be united. We're never going to rise, etc., etc. And their condition was very bad. Their condition was so bad that when God came back and asked this prophet, do you think these bones could live? Instead of saying no, Ezekiel turned to God and said, God, only you know. And sometimes if we look at our community, we feel like that. Can we ever change? But just if we all focus on trying to impact one life at a time, and I close with this story. There was this quote-unquote wise man that would get up in the morning, before he would get into his daily activities, he would walk on the beach. So one day he's walking on the beach, and down in the distance, he sees this youth dancing, or what he thought was dancing. And he thought the youth was dancing to the crashing of the waves to the seashore. As he got closer, he realized the youth wasn't dancing. He was taking starfish and throwing them back into the ocean, because he was trying to get it before the tide resigned. And as he got closer to the youth, what the wise man told him, he looked at the young boy and was like, man, you're wasting your time. Look at all these starfish. You're not going to be able to save them. And as he kept telling the young man what he couldn't do, the young man reached down and grabbed the starfish and threw it in the water and said, I saved that one. And the lesson was, we can't save everybody. But if all of us try to make a positive impact on at least one in our community, we all can have a larger impact on our community as a whole. Thank you.